to the show. Like I always say, I usually don't get around to organizing them until the next day. So yeah, just you want to check that out? Go to Ch Charles Lamson's webcam video, and that's the name of my channel. I know it's lame, but I'll change it one day. What can one do, huh? All right. So let's see here. Actually, I think I might stick with it now, just for consistency's sake. I mean, seems like yeah. People at least know where to find it now. Okay. Anyway, yeah, if I change the name now, it's gonna be. I think it's gonna actually do more. Okay, harm than good. But Bernays goes on to say in his book Propaganda, 1929. While the concrete recommendations of the Public Relations Council may vary infinitely according to individual circumstances, his general plan of work may be reduced to two types, which I might term continuous interpretation and dramatization by high spotting. The two may be alternative or may be pursued concurrently. Continuous interpretation is achieved by trying to control every approach to the public mind in such a manner that the public receives the desired impression, often without being conscious of it. High spotting, on the other hand, vividly seizes the attention of the public and fixes it upon some detail or aspect which is typical of the entire enterprise. When a real estate corporation, which is erecting a tall office building, makes it 10 feet taller than the highest skyscraper in existence, that is dramatization. Which method is indicated, or whether both be indicated concurrently, can be determined only after a full study of objectives and specific possibilities. Another interesting case of focusing public attention on the virtues of a product was shown in the case of gelatin. Its advantages in increasing the digestibility and nutritional value of milk were proven in the Mellon Institute of Industrial Research. So this suggestion was made and carried out that to further this knowledge, gelatin be used by certain hospitals and school systems to be tested out there. The favorable results of such tests were then projected to other leaders in the field, with the result that they followed that group leadership and utilized gelatin for the scientific purposes which had been proven to be sound at the research institution. The idea carried momentum. The tendency of big business is to get bigger. Through mergers and monopolies, it is constantly increasing the number of persons with whom it is in direct contact. All this has intensified and multiplied the public relationship of business. The responsibilities are of many kinds. There is a responsibility to the stockholders, numbering perhaps 5 persons or 500,000, who have entrusted their money to the concern and have the right to know how the money is being used. A concern which is fully aware of its responsibility toward its stockholders will furnish them with frequent letters urging them to use the product in which their money is invested, and their influence to promote its sale, and use their influence to promote its sale. It has a responsibility toward the dealer, which it may express by inviting him at its expense to visit the home factory. It has a responsibility toward the industry as a whole, which should restrain it from making exaggerated and unfair selling claims. It has a responsibility toward the retailer and will see to it that its salesmen express the quality of the product which they have to sell. There is a responsibility toward the consumer who is impressed by a clean and well-managed factory, open to his inspection. And the general public, apart from its function as a potential customer, is influenced in its attitude toward the concern by what it knows of that concern's financial dealings. Yeah, it's sort of an archaic term for, I guess, business, the concern. But I think the reason he uses that word is because I think he's also referring to nonprofits and, I guess, government organizations as well. Its labor policy, even by the livableness of the houses in which its employees dwell. There is no detail too trivial to influence the public in a favorable or unfavorable sense. The personality of the president may be a matter of importance, for he perhaps dramatizes the whole concern to the public mind. Uh, yeah, that point he makes there uh, reminds me of Lee Iacocca back when Chrysler was having its problems. I think it was Chrysler. Yeah, I believe so. Dodge. Yeah, they were having problems, I guess, back in the 80s or something like that. And they got a bailout back then as well. And but they wanted to restore consumer confidence in the product. And so one of the first things they did was announce, "Hey, our new CEO is Lee Iacocca." The guy had already had sort of a cult of personality built around him, and so that act in and of itself helped the company. Yeah, he ended up he was actually quite successful, and he actually brought the company out of its slump, and they were actually able to pay the government back the money that the government used to bail them out with. Needless to say, I mean, you guys know that was back in the 80s, and Chrysler has since gone downhill since then. But that's just an example of what they're talking about. The personality of the president. That's an example of what Bernays is talking about when he says the personality of the president may be a matter of importance, for he perhaps dramatizes the whole concern to the public mind. It may be very important to what charities he contributes, and what civic societies he holds office. If he is a leader in his industry, the public may demand that he be a leader in his community. The businessman has become a responsible member of the social group. It is not a question of ballyhoo, of creating a picturesque fiction for public consumption. It is merely a question of finding appropriate modes of expressing the personality that is to be dramatized. Some businessmen can be their own best public relations counsel. Again, that was. But in the majority of cases, knowledge of the public mind and of the ways in which it will react to an appeal is a specialized function, which must be undertaken by the professional expert. Big business, I believe, is realizing this more and more. It is increasingly availing itself of. When I say I, that was actually Edward Bernays. Edward Bernays, believes is realizing this more and more. It is increasingly availing itself of the services of the specialist in public relations, whatever may be the title accorded him. And it is my conviction, Edward Bernays', that as big business becomes bigger, the need for expert manipulation of its innumerable contacts with the public will become greater. One reason why the public relations of a business are frequently placed in the hands of an outside expert, instead of being confided to an officer of the company, is the fact that the correct approach to a problem may be indirect. For example, when the luggage industry attempted to solve some of its problems by a public relations policy, it was realized that the attitude of railroads, of steamship companies, and of foreign government-owned railroads was an important factor in the handling of luggage. If a railroad and a baggage man, for their own interest, can be educated to handle baggage with more facility and promptness, with less damage to the baggage, and less inconvenience to the passenger, if the steamship company lets down, in its own interests, its restriction on luggage, if the foreign government eases up on its baggage costs and transportation in order to further tourist travel, then the luggage manufacturers will profit. The problem, then, is to increase the sale of their luggage, was to have these and other forces come over to their point of view. Hence, the public relations campaign was directed not to the public, who were the ultimate consumers, but to these other elements. Also, if the luggage manufacturer can educate the general public on what to wear on trips and when to wear it, he may be increasing the sale of men and women's clothing, but he will at the same time be increasing the sale of his luggage. Propaganda, since it goes to basic causes, can very often be most effective through the manner of its introduction. A campaign against unhealthy cosmetics might be waged for fighting for a return to the washcloth and soap. A fight that very logically might be taken up by health officials all over the country who would urge the return to the salutary and helpful washcloth and soap instead of cosmetics. The development of public opinion for a cause or line of socially constructive action may very often be the result of a desire on the part of the propagandist to meet successfully his own problem, which the socially constructive cause would further. And by doing so, he is actually fulfilling a social purpose in the broadest sense. The soundness of a public relations policy was likewise shown in the case of a shoe manufacturer who made service shoes for patrolmen, firemen, letter carriers, and men in similar occupations. He realized that if he could make acceptable the idea that men in such work ought to be well shod, he would sell more shoes and at the same time further the efficiency of the men. He organized as part of his business a foot protection bureau. This bureau disseminated scientifically accurate information on the proper care of the feet, principles which the manufacturer had incorporated in the construction of the shoes. The result was that civic bodies, police chiefs, fire chiefs, and others interested in the welfare and comfort of their men furthered the ideas his product stood for and the product itself, with the consequent effect that more of his shoes were sold more easily. The application of this principle of a common denominator of interest between the object and that is sold and the public goodwill can be carried to infinite degrees. It matters not how much capital you have, how fair the rates may be, how favorable the conditions of service. If you haven't behind you a sympathetic public opinion, you are bound to fail. This is the opinion of Samuel Insull, one of the foremost traction magnates of the country. Once again, this is written in 1929, so bear that in mind. And the late Judge Gary of the United States Steel Corporation expressed the same idea when he said, by the way, I think Judge is actually the guy's name. He's not a judge. His first name is Judge, last name Gary. Judge Gary of the United States Steel Corporation expressed the same idea when he once said, once you have the goodwill of the general public, you can go ahead in the work of constructive expansion. Too often many try to discount this vague and intelligible Too often many try to discount this vague and intangible element. That way lies destruction. End quote. Public opinion is no longer inclined to be unfavorable to the large business merger. It resents the censorship of business by the Federal Trade Commission. It has broken down the antitrust laws where it thinks they hinder economic development. It breaks great trusts and mergers which it excoriated a decade ago. The government now permits large aggregations of producing and distributing units as evidenced by mergers among railroads and other public utilities, because representative government reflects public opinion. Public opinion itself fosters the growth of mammoth industrial enterprises. In the opinion of millions of small investors, mergers and trusts are friendly giants and not ogres, because of the economies mainly due to quantity production which they have affected and can pass on to the consumer. This result has been to a great extent obtained by a deliberate use of propaganda in its broadest sense. It was obtained not only by modifying the opinion of the public as the governments modified and marshaled the opinion of their publics during the war, but often by modifying the business concern itself. A cement company may work with road commissions gratuitously to maintain testing laboratories in order to ensure the best quality roads to the public. A gas company maintains a free school of cookery. But it would be rash and unreasonable to take it for granted that because public opinion has come over to the side of big business, It will always remain there. Only recently, once again, this is 1929, this is written, Professor W.Z. Ripley of Harvard University